Hey guys, I'm back. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the book so far. Um, Today we are going to read chapter 6, and it is titled The Chocolate Cup. Not many of the chapters have chapter titles, but this one does. It's called The Chocolate Cup. Before I start reading, I do want to do a quick recap. Every time I read, I'll always do a quick little recap of what's happened. Our young dragon, Aventurine, has left her family cave in the mountains and is out in the world around her. She found a little man and he gave her some chocolate. It turned her into a human. Now we're at the point in the book where she has met Frederick and Greta, who has told her they would give her a ride to town and give her food and clothes. She didn't quite know what clothes were, but she would have to be their maid and housekeeper and take care of all of the daily duties. She didn't like that idea. She got a really bad sense from them. Greta was very forcefully grabbing her shoulder and wanting her to go in the house. Aventurine takes off running down the streets of the town. She's not quite sure where she is. She's lost. She's confused. She doesn't know what to do. She sees the clock tower, and that would be the clock tower right here. So she is wandering the streets of the town. All right, let's see what happens in chapter 6. Chapter 6. Chocolate houses were nothing like I'd expected. When the scent of chocolate growing stronger and stronger led me to the open doorway of yet another yellow and white building, I stopped outside it in disbelief. 2 humans nearly bumped into me from behind. "Well, excuse me," the woman, who was closer, yanked the edges of her big dress away from me, even though I hadn't touched it. Her bright red fur was piled on top of her head in bunches, and she had it to tilt her pointy chin high to look down at her wrinkled nose at me. The man beside her cleared his throat, his dark skin flushing over his fancy neck knot. "If we might pass." I gave them both a narrowed-eyed, accusing glance. "This building isn't made of chocolate." The man glanced at the woman beside him, the thin blocks of fur over his eyes shooting upward. "No," he said, but he didn't say it as if he was certain. "Definitely not," I assured him and crossed my arms. "So where can I find a real chocolate house in this city?" At that, the woman's eyes rolled almost as alarmingly as Frederick's had earlier that day. "This is a real chocolate house, child," she said. "The most famous chocolate house in Drunchenberg." I thought even country folk knew that. "Well," the man's shoulders moved up and down. "I don't know if I say the best, Countess. The Chocolate Cup is the oldest and most established of the 3 chocolate houses. But Meckelhof's has become increasingly popular since the crown princess gave it to her protege. And I've even heard—" "Nonsense. No one of any real importance favors Metcalf's," said the woman. "And we needn't even talk about the little hole in the wall that calls itself the 3rd chocolate house," she sniffed. "But regardless," her brown gaze moved up and down, inspecting me from the top of my long black head fur, which hung loose around my shoulders, to the mucky cloth coverings around my feet. "The Chocolate Cup only caters to the very best society. So if you're looking for handouts, little girl, you'd be wise to look elsewhere." Handouts? I didn't know what that word meant, but I knew exactly how to read her look. It was the same look my sister Citrine had given me during her last visit, when I told her that I didn't see the point in learning how to write poetry in iambic pentameter. That look said, without the need for other words, You will never be impressive enough to be worthy of my attention. Unfortunately, I didn't have any fire bells to belch into the woman's face in answer. The look on Citrine's face when I had done that had been priceless. Even without smoke or flame, though I couldn't roll my own eyes back at the Countess, so I did, spinning them just as dizzily as any natural-born human might. Then I marched into the shop in front of her and firmly shut the door in her face. Her outraged gasp reached me through the glass, but then I hardly cared. The moment the shop door closed, I was knocked to my knees by the strength of the scent that rose to meet me. Oh, chocolate. It was even better than I had remembered. Even better than the chocolate that the food mage had carried with him. So rich, so intense, so pure, so close. I let out a little moan of yearning. Dimly, I was aware that the little black tables were scattered throughout the room before me, and that groups of humans were gathered in chattering groups around those tables. Even more vaguely, I was aware that the whole room seemed to be falling silent now, as all of them turned to stare at me where I knelt in front of the doorway. None of this mattered. None of it was the slightest interest to me compared to that smell. Chocolate was scattered across all the tables in various forms. Chocolate in bowls, chocolate in glasses. There were even more chocolatey delicacies sitting in a vase, glittering glass case to my left. But I wanted the real thing, the source. I rose to my feet and I aimed myself at the open door at the back of the room as if I were being yanked by a wonderful invisible chain. I beg your pardon. A black-clad man with skin as pale as chalk lunged forward to stand in my path before I'd made it 2 full steps. Do you have a reservation, miss? A what? I batted at him, but he didn't move out of my way, and he was too solid for me to slip around him. The chocolate cup is far too busy to welcome any customers without prior reservations. His thin lips curled as he gazed down at me. So if you don't have a reservation, as I strongly assume from both your clothing and your manners. A titter of laughter sounded from the nearby tables. I shook my head impatiently. Why was he wasting my time with this nonsense? I am not a customer, whatever that is, I said. I'm your new apprentice. He blinked 3 times quickly, his lips uncurled. Our apprentice? Absolutely, I said. I've come here to work. I might not know much about human society, but I'd figured our apprenticeship by now. From the hints that Greta had let out on our journey, my apprentice was someone who learned how to work with things. And what else in the world would I ever want to work with? Jasper had his philosophy, Citrine had her poetry, and at long last, I had chocolate. Now that heavenly scent finally surrounded me. It was almost enough to make me stop aching for my wing and claws. But then he ruined it. You, he said. He looked up at me and down and then bursting into laughter. You? I frowned at him, shaking my long, tangled black head fur out of my face to meet his eyes directly. Of course, me. I said, who else would I be talking about? But he didn't answer. He was laughing too hard. The whole shop of humans was laughing with him too. And they kept on laughing as he picked me up by both arms and carried me out of the shop a moment later. It didn't matter how much I struggled or how hard I kicked my legs along the way of the path with the slippery, mucky, cloth-covered feet. There was no way to make him drop me until we were 3 full feet away from the shop windows. Then finally, he lifted his hands and let me go. Ouch! I landed hard on my backside in the middle of the dirty, bumpy stone street. Horses whined behind me, and a human cursed me from getting in his way. Something terrible squished underneath my outflung hands. The chocolate house guard wiped his own hands together and strode back into the building, ignoring the chaos in the street outside. Well, he wouldn't ignore me for long. I jumped up and lunged for the doorway. Just as he closed the door in my face, a hard metallic click sounded on the other side. When I tried the handle, it wouldn't move, no matter how furiously I yanked it. As I peered through the immovable glass door of the chocolate cup, I saw every human inside rise to their feet, smacking their hands together in applause for the chocolate guard. He bent forward in an elaborate flourish, and the applause grew even louder. That countess I'd closed the door on earlier was clapping hardest of all. Seething, I glared at those smug, puny humans through the glass and set my teeth together with a snap. They thought they'd gotten rid of me, did they? Well, this wasn't the only chocolate house in Drunchenberg. According to the snooty countess's friend, it might not even be the best. There were 2 more chocolate houses in the city. All I had to do was find them. Finding the second chocolate house wasn't a problem. It turned out to be only 2 streets away in a yellow and white shop that could have been a twin to the chocolate cup. Unfortunately, it had a guard too. This one was a woman, but she was just as strong as the first guard. After tossing me out of her own chocolate house, she lingered outside to give me a lecture, ticking off her points on her dark brown fingers as I lay on the street before her. Firstly, everyone wants to work with chocolate. Ever since the first chocolatier from Villany set up the shop in Drunchenberg 5 years ago. Here in Metcalf's, we're honored to have the Crown Princess's own protege. So we only take the very best of the best apprentices, and then only with the proper references, which she swept me with a clear, clean gaze, clearly don't possess. Secondly, you're dressed like a beggar and you stink of the streets. So no reputable shop would ever take you seriously as an apprentice chocolatier, even if you did have a reference. Making chocolate is an art, not a craft. So chocolatiers can only come from the respectable classes. Thirdly, you clearly have no manners. So you couldn't be a waitress and serve our customers their chocolate, even if we gave you new clothes for the job. And fourthly, she shook her head as she looked down at me, her expression infuriatingly compassionate. Why don't you visit the public baths? If you clean yourself up, then perhaps, if you're really lucky, someone may take you as a maid. Oh, I would have eaten her for that if I could. I would have devoured her in an instant. I would have set her up in flames. But only a pitiful, toothless snarl came out of my small human mouth as she didn't even seem to hear it as she turned away, tossing her final advice over her shoulder. There's no point waiting. There's no point wanting what you can't have, little girl. And chocolate isn't for the likes of you. Then she walked back into the chocolate house where she reigned and didn't even bother to close the door behind her. Seething, I lay in the street and absorbed my new information as horses trotted around me and human curses floated over my head. What was the point of being a human if I couldn't be around chocolate? I'd finally found the thing I wanted to work with for the rest of my life. But no one here would even let me near it. If only I had my wings and claws, then I could go ahead and just take it like a proper dragon, whether they liked it or not. If I ever saw that dastardly food mage again, I would bite him. I didn't care if my human teeth were too blunt or puny to do real damage. I would make him take back his spell, no matter what it took. And then I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees and stepped onto the sidewalk, gritting my teeth in determination. Dragons never gave up, and there was still one more chocolate house in Drunchenberg, even if that snooty countess had called it a hole in the wall. Not worth talking about. I'd grown up in a cavern. I liked holes in the wall, and even if by human standards I didn't look respectable enough to work with chocolate, well, why on earth should I let that stop me? I'd been through one transformation already in the last 2 days. Now, apparently, it was time for a second. How hard could it be? All right, so I'll come back tomorrow and read chapter 7, and we will find out what happens when she gets to the third chocolate house. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.